Hey guys, so as most of you probably know by now, Adobe released a generative AI tool that is native to Photoshop. So I want to push the limits to see what it's actually capable of, and then talk a little bit about if this is the ethical model that artists have been looking for. All right, so let's start with some of the obvious stuff. We know we can extend photos. So here I'm going to select a portion of the image. I'm doing one side at a time. If I fill in both sides at the same time, the resolution is going to be a lot lower. And I can't control each side independently when I'm selecting variations. So that's pretty cool in a pinch. If you happen to get a shot where you don't quite like the composition, you might be able to fix it. And then I want to see if I can do the same with more specific stuff like this lizard, and it works pretty well. And then you can remove stuff from images too. So if there wasn't any way to get that airplane wing out of the shot, that's taken care of. So I got a shot of these really awesome foggy hills, but I was on the roof of this mall at the time, and it takes some tweaking, but uh, it's pretty solid. So what if I want to change the background? You can tell this looks like lightning based on training from a bunch of stock images. So what if I try to put some weight to the prompt, like more clouds and less lightning? And it looks like there's not really any impact. So this isn't trained on some of the more advanced stuff that some of the other models are trained on in terms of advanced prompting. Okay, so what if I want to augment my process in terms of creating art? Like, I'll take this little robot that I created and crop it back a little bit so I can see what happens when I try to regenerate portions of it. Let's say I want to try out different variations of what its arm might look like. So you can see what I've described before. Like when it comes to images, the AI kind of can gather what it's looking at and make some decisions. Because in drawing, it's sort of an illusion. Like your brain is interpreting that this thing has wheels and arms and a face. But the AI doesn't really have a reference point. It's not able to make those contextual decisions on top of the art that I've made. It's emulating the style a little bit, which is pretty cool. Um, but there's a long way to go before you can actually do anything like really groundbreaking. So I want to extend it out further just to see what happens. And this is actually pretty cool. I could see this as a good way to like augment the process the same way when I just sort of scribble stuff on the paper before I see and pull shapes out of it. But honestly, if you have the skills, it's sort of quicker to do that manually anyway. But it could be good for like divergent thinking and conceptualizing. So here's an eye I did, and if I try to expand on it, will it be able to kind of understand what I did and then expand on it? And it's not great. It it actually is kind of like it kind of understands what I'm doing here, but it doesn't understand how I'm using brushstrokes to create this stuff. So just for good measure and because of the claims they've made about their training set, I want to compare this to another tool. I happen to use Runway for editing, and I know they have a generative image tool, but I don't really use it. I assume that it's based on Stable Diffusion, so this is trained on the Lion database set for that, and for that reason, there's a lot of issues. But in theory, it should be better given that it's taking uh, copywritten work from artists. And then they've done a lot of tuning as well, so that's not great. Okay, so what happens if I just fill an empty screen without any prompt? It looks like it's referencing the fact that the screen's white and then just making random images. And then if I prompt it with something generic, it's gonna give me something generic. But this definitely has a very stock image feel to it. Okay, so here's the part where I can see my retention graph dropping off, but I'm really hoping that it doesn't. When it comes to training, Adobe's only pulling from public domain images and their own stock library. So is Adobe the one who did right by artists here? Not quite. This is a step in the right direction, but there are still some issues. First of all, the request by artists is to be able to opt into training. Adobe's opt out. Once a model's trained on work, it can't be untrained. I don't think it's reasonable to expect artists to proactively seek out every generative model in development and opt out of it ahead of time. In Adobe's case, this is a little bit curbed by the fact that you have to be using Adobe for your work to get trained on it, and the opt out process is relatively easy. Secondly, they did not renegotiate the terms of their Adobe stock catalog with the people who made that work. They said retroactively that they'll figure out some means for compensation, but that conversation hasn't even happened yet, which is not a great look. I mentioned in a previous video that it's going to be very difficult for artists to avoid AI if legislation and the products don't reach the standard artists are asking for. And this is part of why. Adobe is at the core of most people's workflows across all creative industries. They've had aspects of ML and AI in their tools for a long time, and they're going to become more prevalent. It's also worth mentioning that even if copyright laws adapt appropriately to this environment and some of the value being generated is ceded back to the artists, I honestly think this is still just a stopgap. You can see in Photoshop that it looks like this model was trained on stock images. The stuff that you can get out of Midjourney is way better, but there's so many layers of abstraction and ways that they interpolate the prompts and things like that that I don't think you can say for sure how much of the quality is attributed to the input data. I can imagine a world where eventually you get pretty good results with or without artist data, or you'll have enough artists opting in that eventually you'll get really solid outputs anyway. So for the past few months, I had temporarily stopped using generative diffusion models for making visual art. And this might be a little bit misguided, but I think I see a gap here and a way to sort of move forward. There are a ton of AI channels cranking out tutorial and demo videos with like no self-awareness when it comes to the pitfalls of AI. And there's even more channels that are brazenly using AI for side hustles and get rich quick schemes on how to essentially spam other people with garbage content. When it comes to AI art, maybe there's room for videos that use AI tools, but also break down what's happening and educate users on why they should support the artists who are responsible for making these tools as awesome as they are. If that's something you guys are interested in, please let me know, and I'll consider continuing down that path from time to time. On the product side, I've been working on projects where I use AI tools, but honestly, it's either such a small part of the process or requires so much tweaking and rework that it doesn't make for a compelling video. I've seen a lot of hand waving and smoke and mirrors on demos every time a new tool comes out, and I'm not going to follow that trend, but I'll show where I am meaningfully using these tools to actually facilitate product development. Okay, bye.